Something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and I have a show for you today that I think you're going to love. I think you're going to feel like you've been wrapped up in a warm blanket and just held for 30 to 40 minutes. And I would love to hear how you feel after. This is my podcast number 283. And if you recall last week, I was sitting in a camp chair in the middle of all these boxes, just made my big move into my new house. Nothing was unpacked. Well, here's a week later. The chair is now back to its normal chair. There's a lot of boxes still over there. And I could have done the same podcast from the same place, but I'm making progress. The thing is, my life is big, and there are so many things going in my life and filling my life with such joy that I haven't made a ton of progress. I went to Mexico. I think I told you that, on a service mission that was really life-changing. This was not just a service mission where you went and worked in an orphanage and then went back to your resort. We stayed in the orphanage, in their dormitories. There were 8 people in a room the size of a parking space in a parking lot, 4 bunk beds, and not room to get between them. We ate their food. We cooked their food. We did major work projects. In fact, one project we did was painting, and they had just put new tile in this building, and we got paint all over the floor. So I spent 2 hours on my hands and knees going through this whole hallway. I lost 2 nails. Unfortunately, there were these big fingers on each hand. But even though I haven't even fixed them yet, I haven't had time to go to my nail place yet. It was so rewarding. And now when I look down, I'm like, oh yeah, I lost those on my hands and knees with a little green scrubbing paint off the floor. If you haven't ever done a service mission in your life, I really encourage you at some point in your time life to go with your family, to go by yourself, to go with a group of girls and women, whatever, so that you have that opportunity to step into someone else's shoes. It's a different type of experience. But I have enough of my house put together today that I was able to actually put into this frame a bronze statue that I have that I've always wanted to have on my podcast. And I did never have the space to do it in my old home. This bronze is called Dreams Revealed. And as I started thinking about why I was so drawn to have this, I think that's what we're doing here, isn't it? We're talking about dreams, the dreams that you have, the dreams that I have, that through process of thinking and pondering and meditating and listening, our dreams are revealed to us and we see the path. We understand the way forward. And that's the gift that I give to myself every single week by coming on here. It's the gift that I hope I give to you as your dreams are revealed to you. And that she will watch over us on these podcasts. I don't know, I thought about stopping them when I made my big move, but I don't think so. I'm here for a long haul yet. Wouldn't you love to see me turn 80? Well, in just a month, I turn 70. So you'll get to see that one for sure. What I learned to do today was to really give to you some of what I think is maybe the most profound wisdom that has come to me in my life of 69 years. And I thought about all the different, when I'm on other people's podcasts, so not when I give my podcast, but I'm on a lot of people's, I'm a guest on their podcast. And I was thinking about the questions that they asked me. And they're pretty consistent. Some people want to know about weight loss, and maybe it's a physical journey podcast, but most podcasts consistently ask the same question. So I wrote down what I thought those questions were as I remember them and my answers that I always give. And my answers that I give are never rehearsed. They're not written down. I don't see a script passing in front of me. They're just from my heart. And using my heart and using my brain and the things that I've learned, I respond. And so that's what I want to do. I'm going to give myself today an interview as if I was on someone else's podcast. So one of the very first questions they usually always ask me, if they know anything about my life at all, is that they say something about transition. Mary, you have transitioned through so much in your life, from so many things. How did that happen? Well, first let's talk about transition. We all transition. This is not something that's unique to me. We all go through different transitions in our life. So knowing how we do that is of value to all of us. I think maybe my life had more transitions than some. I started out living in Iowa in a very small town of 250 people. My parents had to quit college and come home because it was during the Depression. My mom was the daughter of sharecroppers, and they were going to lose their farm back to the owners. My dad's parents had a little grocery store in town, and they were going to lose their store. And so both of them quit college and came back home, and they survived. My mom's parents kept their farm because of her work on the farm. My dad's family kept their little store because they didn't have to pay him, just give him room and board. And they were able to keep their little grocery store open. So my parents' dream for all of us was to have a college education. And they had 3 children. I have a brother and a sister and myself. And they wanted us so desperately to be able to live their dream of finishing college. But the problem with that is that when you have a college education and you're from this town of 250 people, you're destined to leave. They knew that they were signing the documents that said, my children are not going to live next to me because there's no work for a college-educated person in this small town. So that was my first big transition, leaving Iowa, leaving this small town to go to school. I came out to Utah to go to school. I had my first year of college in Iowa. I had joined the LDS Church, and I came out here to Utah to go to school at Brigham Young University and graduated from there. When I think about an 18-year-old, I was 19 at the time, driving across country by myself, checking myself in to a dormitory where I knew no one. Someone who was so afraid of everything, had so much self-doubt. How did I ever have the courage to do that? I didn't even want to go to girls' camp because I went 1 year and I felt people laughed at me and they opened the cookies my mom sent and ate them all because they had no respect for me. And that same little girl had the courage to come out here. A big transition for me. After I graduated, and I wasn't married yet, and at Brigham Young University, if you're not married after your 4-year degree, it's a failure. And so at age 27, I got married to someone that I knew was not a good situation for me. And I stayed in that marriage for 28 years, but that was another transition into marriage. And then I made the transition into motherhood. I had 3 beautiful children. And at some point, then the transition into being a grandmother was 7 grandchildren. I made the transition into working for someone else, into being an entrepreneur. When I knew that in order to support my family, I had to do something other than be a social worker, which meant I was away from my children all day. And I knew I had to do something different than selling Avon door to door or teaching preschool if I was going to support my family. And I kicking and screaming into the role of being an entrepreneur, starting my own company and stepping forward. That's a big transition from never having worked on my own, just working for someone else who provided my health insurance and my days off and what was up in life, to running the show. That was a big transition. One of my next big transitions, of course, then was when I decided to divorce and made that decision at age 55 for the 10,000th time. I mean, that's the kind of decision I think I had made every single day of my married life. And then I didn't. Those are all stories for another point in time. The point is about the transitions. When I transitioned from living a life of fear to living a life of authenticity. From that point, then I transitioned into a retired person and to launching a new company, Mary Crafts, Inc., to doing a podcast, to doing motivational speaking, to being an author, to climbing Kilimanjaro, to being a badass, and now into being who I authentically believe I am, a loving being, here to love myself and to lift others to love themselves. Nothing more, nothing less. That's a lot of transitioning, a lot of moves. How do you do that in your life and transition successfully and move from something to something else? I think it comes down to what I call probably the 3 greatest lessons that I have learned in my life, and I want to share them with you today, and that they might be of value to you. Now, I think I've learned thousands, hundreds of thousands of lessons, but if I had to categorize them, I think these might be the greatest ones. The first one being the lesson of accountability, to being responsible for who I am, where I am, and all things about me. When I made that decision that I was no longer going to be a victim, that was a huge step for me. It allowed me for the very first time in my life to stand up, to feel what it felt like to move from having the weight of the world on my shoulders to pushing it off and standing up. It's like Atlas when he stands up and takes the world off his shoulders. I was accountable for everything in my life. And the great news about being accountable is what? You can change it. If you don't like where you are, you can change it. I was the biggest excuse maker in the world. I had so many excuses, so many things that were falsehoods, so many things that I told myself that weren't true in order to make it not my fault, someone else's fault. I'm German heritage, and I had big bones, and my Aunt Neva was quite overweight, and I was a chef and a cook, and of course I was going to be fat my entire life. What kind of BS is that? And those tapes were in my brain going around and around till finally I took accountability. Well, wonderful that you have big bones that are strong, and you can build muscles around and become fit. Wonderful that you can set an example of healthy patterns to eat in a catering business. I mean, on and on and on. When you stop making excuses and believing that you're a victim, I was finally able to walk away from my situation in an abusive, domestic, violent marriage and start the transition to claiming myself. So whatever's going on in your life, if you are still making excuses, if you're still blaming, I can't do that because, or my parents messed me up, or I wasn't born into the right family, or I don't have the brain someone else has, or, My dad beat me. I was sexually abused as a child. Whatever horrific excuse that you are using to remain a victim, you can choose today to be accountable. Now, you're not accountable for anybody else and their behavior. You're not accountable if your dad sexually abused you. You're not accountable for his behavior. He's 100% accountable for for his behavior. But you can now, at this age and time, be 100% accountable for what you're doing with it today. You can remain a victim, you can remain stuck, or you can choose today who you're going to be. That, for me, when I finally stepped into that position, was one of the most freeing things that ever happened in my life of transitions. And it allowed me to transition. I could have said, well, I'm just destined to stay here in Raleigh, Iowa with my 250 people. Even then, I had glimmers of what it looked like to step up into accountability. It's the most joyous place to live. People are scared of being accountable. Don't be. It's pure joy. Because if I don't like something, I get to change it. Isn't that where you want to be? Isn't that how you get to transition? It is. The second big lesson that I think I learned in life was it's connected to being accountable. They're all connected. Is the lesson about fear. I pound this drum on this podcast probably more than any other drum, and that's the drum about fear. Fear, the opposite of love, is not hate. The opposite of love is fear. Because what we fear, we cannot love. And in the end, if I fear who I am, how can I possibly love who I am? I realized at age 50, and I've told this story so many times on my podcast, that I was running my entire life based on fear. I was afraid of failure, and so I worked so hard at being the best caterer in my career. I was afraid of not having enough money, and so I worked extra hard at that. I was afraid of being laughed at, and so I made sure I had the best clothes and the best shoes and drove the best car because I wanted at least to have something that people admired about me because I knew they would never admire me just for me. I was so afraid of being rejected. I was so afraid of not being seen that I became not just the smartest person in the room, but the loudest person in the room. Whoa, check over here. Look at me. Are you paying attention to me? Please don't ignore me. Please don't think me invisible. My entire existence and every decision in it was made out of fear. When I made the decision to replace the fear with love, my life transformed. It transformed into something quite different. I knew at this point I could finally begin to love myself. And that is a beautiful place to live. I wouldn't trade it for anything or anyone. To learn how to love rather than live in fear. So many times I see in our country and our world now, it is so divided, so separate. Why? Because we're afraid. We're afraid what we don't understand. We're afraid of what we don't know. We're afraid that someone else being different threatens who we are. And it doesn't. Someone else can be completely different than me. They can be a member of the LGBTQ community. That doesn't threaten who I am. I can allow them space to be exactly where they want to be at the same time allowing it to me. Someone's Democrat, someone's Republican, someone's independent, whatever. They can be in that place without it threatening my political beliefs. And I can learn to listen and understand them. And when that happens in love, they let down their barriers too. And that's when this whole thing about being vulnerable happens. I'd like you to really ponder fear in your life. If you haven't read my book or purchased it yet, it's on Amazon, Unbounded, From Sorrow to Summit. And it is one of the best books on understanding fear, recognizing fear in you, and how to let go of it and how to release it. I think one of the very first things is to learn to be kind to yourself. Just think about that. Are you kind to yourself? Or do you have a whip? For so many years, I carried a whip. Sometimes I still carry a whip now. But I recognize the whip. And I'm able to shout to myself, put down that whip! Put it down! You never get to where you want to be by using the whip. The whip looks like this. Oh, you're not good at this. Or, I wish I looked like that. Or, I wish my nose was that way. You weren't born with that. The whip looks like, do you like those thunder slides? No. No matter how much you lose, you're still going to have them. And they're still going to be ugly. And there's nothing you can do about it. Whip, whip, whip. Oh, I'm not very funny. I'm kind of boring. Whip, whip, whip. This morning, even me, at this age of life, I got out of the shower. Let's get really personal. So if you want to close this part down, you can. I didn't have a bowel movement this morning, and I try and have one every morning. But when I don't, because I'm 19% body fat, if I don't have a bowel movement, I have a pooch on my stomach, and I don't like the pooch. I've worked very hard, do a lot of crunches and different things and exercises to have a really hard, flat stomach. When I got out of the shower this morning, I looked over at the mirror. I'm like, oh, that's a pooch. I have to make sure today I wear a baggy shirt. And I realized in my hand, I had what? The whip. You're not enough if you have a pooch. You're not enough if you don't have a completely fat stomach. But now I recognize it, and I dropped it. It was like, I am enough. I'm worth loving. I don't need to be afraid of people laughing at me. People don't come around me and hang next to me and call me and text me. John doesn't put his arms around me and think, I love her because she has a flat stomach. That's just a lie. It's a lie I've told myself for so long. I can drop that whip like a hot potato. Woo! I don't need it. Do you think the answer to getting that flat stomach or getting any goal you want is to whip yourself? My love, it isn't. Nothing good ever came out of the whip. Nothing. Now, there's a difference between the whip and encouraging yourself and being committed to yourself and loving yourself. But are you more likely to be the woman or the man or the young teenager or the older woman that you want to be by the whip or by love? Honey, you know the answer. The whip never accomplishes anything. But through love and acceptance and joy and seeing the beauty, that's where transition happens. Let go of the fear. Drop the whip. Be vulnerable. Be open. You know, after losing so much weight, half of my body weight from 284 down to 140, you can't help but have a lot of skin problems. And I had a dream one time when I was in the middle of losing this weight. And I actually saw myself at age 80. And actually, I could have said I saw myself at age 70, I found out. I saw myself at age 80. And I actually was still thin. And I actually was still fit, but I had this tremendous amount of skin hanging from my arms and that saggy old lady skin. And as I sat there and looked at myself, I thought, is that okay? Is that okay? Is that a price that you're willing to pay? And I thought, it is. And so even today, I wear short sleeve shirts. And sometimes I catch people looking down at my arms, and I used to think, well, it was because there were so many muscles there. Okay, that's one thing. But to see them looking because now I have the saggy skin, but that's okay. I've earned that mature skin. It means I've lived life. I'm not a young chicken. It means I've grown. I've transitioned so many times. I've filled my life with so much light that I don't mind showing my age. I don't mind showing the journey. This is just about showing the journey. So whatever is on you that you dislike and you're whipping, don't be afraid to show your journey. Your journey is what makes you you. Within your journey is where you have your greatest lessons. The third thing that I think is my greatest lesson in life has to do with love and this sense of oneness on our planet, of releasing the jealousy, the FOMO, of seeing us as one. If I see something on social media that normally I would have went, oh, brother. Now I say, she's in such a process of learning and seeing people that way. I am them and they are me. And seeing with those eyes is one of the greatest lessons I've had. And it's allowed me to transition once again to a new place where people leave better for having been with me. It's an old thing that one of my clients taught me when I gave an amazing meal one day. And I had a microphone. I walked around the room and the chefs were cooking in the middle. And I was telling all the guests of what they were eating and why I particularly chose those ingredients and what I loved about it. And I shared with them about the farms that things came from. And I asked them to taste and savor it and hold it in his mouth and to actually taste those freshness of those greens that were harvested just that morning. And on went the meal. At the end of the evening, a gentleman motioned me over and he said, Mary, I've eaten around the world. I've eaten in some of the finest Michelin-starred restaurants, but I've never had an evening like this. And of course, I was beaming. My food was so awesome. But then he went on to say, a year from now, I'm not going to remember what I ate tonight, but I'm never going to forget how I felt here. And that taught me such a great lesson, that it's not what we do and the things we say as much as what we leave them feeling and what we genuinely feel towards others. It's an end of separateness. When I hold people in my arms and I think about my heart moving into theirs, I hold them like a mother would hold them. Put my hand up on their head, kiss their cheek. Doesn't matter if it's man, woman, adult, child. I see them the same as my opportunity to give them a piece of that kind of love. It's an end to separateness. It's a beginning of sameness, empathy, a feeling what someone else is feeling. Unique is another word I see. Being one does not mean we're all exactly the same. We're not robots. We're all beautifully unique. And together, that uniqueness comes together to make a whole. And I'm learning this last and final lesson, which I really believe is the lesson that's going to take me on for the rest of my existence here in this life is becoming more and more one with another, more and more about love. And when people leave being with me, they know they've been in the presence of my love. Another great question I find people ask me on when I'm on their podcast is about becoming your authentic self. Now, authentic self is now such a hot button. You know, if you want to hashtag that, you start typing in authentic, you get to AU, and then there are hundreds of hashtags that come up about authentic self. Everyone wants to use it. A lot of people use it as a catchphrase, but I want you to think for a moment if you have had glimmers of your authentic self. Are you walking with that person every day? And what that looks like. Your authentic person can never be found in a whip. Your authentic person is only found in the presence of love. And how do you know and how do you find authentic self? Well, it's another one of the great things I talk about all the time on this podcast, and that is first, vulnerability. You will never find your authentic self as long as you're hiding, as long as you're pretending to be something that you don't think you are, when in reality you probably are, but you think you have to make up something or be something or show something or say something to be this perfect self. Your authentic self lies in the trueness, the genuineness, when you have stripped away all the barriers, all the hiding, all the things that you're trying to get the world to believe about you, all the things that you're putting on social media, all the things that you're want to be seen doing in the places that you want to be seen at. When you strip away all of that, that's when you are your authentic self. When you show up somewhere, not because you want to be seen there, but because you believe that there is something there that will lift you or will lift others. If you continue to show up like that, I'm here because there's something here that will lift me or I'll be able to lift others. You will be walking in your authentic self. If you show up for any other reason, you know it's not you, the real you. You cannot show up while you're hiding. You cannot find her. She'll be hidden to you. But when you show up, bare naked, buck naked, with every wrinkle, every piece of cellulite, every fat, every wrinkle on your arm, every wrinkle in your face, then you begin to step into authenticity. This idea of hiding is put in us from a tiny, tiny age. The first time you color on the wall and your mom comes in and says, "Who colored on the wall?" In that tone of voice, you know the proper response and the proper action is to hide. I don't know who did that. Those colors on the floor there around me, I don't know whose they are. I don't know how they got there. Must have been the neighbor kid that came in and did that. I don't know. Okay. Our first response is to hide. We learn it from such a small age. We have to relearn it. You cannot go back and redo what happened in your childhood, but you can relearn now. And what if someone were to say to you, which I know happens at work, happens in your families, happens everywhere. Say, for example, if you're at the grocery store and you knock a glass jar off the shelf and it falls and breaks, do you run around the corner like you didn't see it, it wasn't you, and then strolling and then whoops, someone broke something on aisle 7, it needs a cleanup. I saw it. Or do you say, I accidentally broke that, I fell off the shelf, I'm so sorry, can I help you clean it up? Do I need to pay for that? I could tell you this, that in the grocery store, when you step up and own that, they never say, yeah, you have to pay for that. Never. They never do. You get rewarded for being authentic. and not hiding. You get rewarded in life for being authentic and not hiding and not being someone that you're not. You know what I discovered when I stopped hiding? That the person that I was hiding this whole life was actually the person that people loved the most. Wasn't that a revelation? It allowed me to feel acceptance for the first time in my life. That people, I didn't have to think that they were accepting me because I was some great caterer. They were accepting me because they saw me. And they saw me because I allowed that. That's how you find your authentic self. And when you find her, never let her go. Every day when you get up, step up to who you truly are. Because I want to tell you right now that who you truly are is the most absolutely beautiful person you've ever imagined, that you've ever dreamed. That's why Dreams Revealed is here with us now to show that to you. Stop pretending. Embrace your authentic self. The other thing people ask me on podcasts is, at 69, what's next for you? Is there something new that's still out there for you? Are you ready to lay down the battle cry? Are you ready to stop being a warrior? What's next? I believe that when we stop being a warrior, we stop living. And then life might as well be over. But I've laid down my shield and my sword. I want to battle less, and I want to love more. It's what I call the way of the peaceful warrior, who still stands for everything I believe to be right, and everything that I think represents love versus fear. But I no longer need to do it shouting. And so in that frame, I think about what's next for me. When I got back from Kili, I always thought, I'm going to climb another mountain. In fact, a bigger and greater mountain than Kilimanjaro. And of course, I was already 66 then. That was 3 years ago. And I've already realized, nope, I'm not going to climb another mountain. I did that. And it was enough. And I am enough. And I learned that on the mountain. Now, not that I might not still climb smaller mountains and perhaps some hills and go down to some valleys. But there are adventures yet ahead of me. Adventure is one of my words, and I love it. I claim it. Tomorrow, actually, I leave, and my whole family and my children and grandchildren are going to Wyoming to camp and help my son who's building a cabin up there. And do I love my bed and my soft sheets and my warm showers? Yep. I learned that in Mexico. Yep. But it's an adventure to go with your family. I'm not going to be afraid. I wonder if I can do it. I wonder if I can do this. I know I can, because I don't have to do anything more than my very best. And my very best is enough. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be the strongest person there. I don't have to do more work than anybody to give me value. I'm valuable to be just Mary, the mom, the grandma, and that's enough. As soon as we get home, the next day we're flying to Europe. And I'm going to do 2 podcasts from Europe coming up. You're going to love those. I think they're going to be very fun. But there is so much adventure yet for me. And there's so much more of me yet to discover. I look forward to even more meditation and more times of just learning about me and how I fit in this world and the next world and the next world. And what I know I dream, I can manifest. I've learned that in my life. And there may be a time when I'm no longer adventuresome and out climbing mountains, but that's okay. I can always read. And if I can't read, then I can listen. And if I can't listen, I can touch and I can hold. There's always more for me until I take my last breath. That is the set of my sails. When we go to Europe, we're going to get on a clipper ship and we're going to sail the Mediterranean. And where we go on that sea will be determined by the set of the sail and how the wind blows us and where it goes. I am not one that how matter how old I get, I'm not going to have control of the sails. One hand on the set of the sail, the other on the rudder. I may go fast at sometimes, I may go slow at sometimes, but the set of my sail is growth, always. Sometimes that means turning into the wind. Sometimes that means turning away and sheltering. But I determine that. No one else. Crafting a meaningful life is become my passion. It's what I talk about. It's what I share. It's what I want for you. That's why you're listening, and that's why you've listened to the end, because it's important to you as well. You know that your only legacy you're going to leave behind here is the life that you crafted. And was it meaningful? So until next week, remember, be accountable. Let go of fear. Embrace love. Find ways that you are more like others, less different from them. Be vulnerable. Be authentic. Know what's next for you. At least know what the set of your sail is. Next week, I'll see you in Rome. Namaste.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.